Okay, this is just a short video just to give you a little bit of help to get you started in the forthcoming CTF. So we're going to talk about a couple of things. The very first thing is effectively how do you find the machines that are actually on the network. So we're going to talk a little bit about Nmap. How do you actually gain remote access to a server? You will be using a Ubuntu server. So we're going to talk a little bit about remote access using SSH, and then we're going to look at the Linux or the typical Linux file structure and some of the key things there, and then we're going to look at some of the most basic commands, and then we'll talk a little bit about sudo or super user. So we're going to not waste any time, we're going to go straight into it. So the first thing we're going to do is, if I change my desktop here, we would normally typically start with opening a terminal, and if you want to make the text a little bit larger you can press Control and Shift and plus, and that will make it bigger, and then Control and minus, and that will make it smaller. So we're going to kick off pretty much straight away with Nmap. So one of the first things we want to know is what machines are in our vicinity. So the first thing we need to know is what is our IP address. So by doing IPA, that will give us our addresses. The very first one is our loopback, which will be 127.0.0.1, but the one that we're really after is the adapter ETH0, and here we can actually see the IP address /24, so basically 255.255.255.0. So this is the subnet, and this is the IP range that we want to scan. So let's clear the screen a moment. So we're going to start with Nmap. First of all, we're going to do a look at the services and the version of services that may be running on the target machines. We're going to be scanning various ports, which is -P, and we want from 1 to 65535, so we want to scan all of the ports on all the machines, and then we want to scan our own IP address, which is 128/24. And what this is going to do, it's not just going to look at our address, but it's also going to look at all the addresses around us as well. So if I press enter now, give that a few seconds or probably a minute, and depending on the type of scans that we are running, this could take, a couple of seconds to even hours if on a much larger network. So we're just basically looking for other machines in our area, and it's provided us a list. Now, one of the things here, if this was being done in a professional environment, we wouldn't want to keep running this type of scan over and over again. So what I would have typically done at this stage would be to run the scan, but then I would have either told it to go to an output, or even using the right facing chevron here, and then I would have just gone Nmap scan, and then what that would do is once it's done the scan, it actually puts it into a text file for me. So again, let's give it a couple of minutes, and then I've got that information stored, so I'm just going to copy it to my desktop. So to complete a file name, I can type the first couple of letters of the file name, and then if I press the tab key, it will, as long as that's the only file with the similar name, it grabs it. And I'm going to go into the home directory and it's going to be for the Kali user, which I am at the moment. And what I want to do is go to the desktop, and there you can see the file has been created on my desktop, and if I can open that now, and then I've got all the information from the scan in my text document. And then this makes it easier for referencing later on, because I don't have to keep running that same scan over and over again, which could probably get me found out by a network administrator. Okay. So the next thing I know is that my machine is this 128. So again, we know this because if I was to do IPA, we can see here that our machine here is 192.168.75.128. So I can tell that this is myself, so I don't want to include that. You can see on this particular machine that all the ports were scanned on my machine, and effectively they've all been ignored, so I haven't actually got any services running on this version of Kali, which in some respects is good. But then I can actually look at some of the other machines on my network, and you can see that various ports are open. The thing that really stands out to me here is that I have this Nmap scan report here for 133. So this is my target machine, which I wouldn't know this at the time, but I can guess that this is. And what I'm looking at here is for weaknesses or a point of entry, and I've got 2 points of entry here. One is going to be a web page, so you can see that it's running Apache and it's actually got a web page running on here, so that may deserve a look. And also we've got SSH or OpenSSH running on this machine as well on port 22, so this allows me then to remote into this particular machine. So I'm going to now turn my attentions to the SSH. So as I know that this machine here is the machine that I'm actually looking at, so I can prove that. I have a user account on here called test, and I enter a secret password, and you can see from here that we have a IP address 192.168.75.133. So that is the actual IP address of the target machine that I'm looking for. So I've confirmed that, and I've actually got an account here. So if I now exit, and I'm going to swap back to this machine here, my Kali machine, and I want to remote into that system. So in order to do that, I am going to use the SSH command, and I'm going to use the user account that you saw me log in with earlier, which is test. And to actually use this to actually remote access into a remote system, I actually do something similar to your email address where you have a user at a particular IP. So I'm using test at, and then I just enter the IP of the target machine, which you'll remember is 192.168.75.133. And by doing this, I can now press enter, and then it will ask me and set up a secure connection between myself and that server, and ask me if I want to continue. I will press yes, and then once I press yes, now it will ask me for a password. So it's basically telling me that this will create an access for me. So again, I enter that user's password, so if I knew it, I can enter it here, and very similar to what you saw when I accessed directly into the machine, you can actually see that same or similar information here. And again, you can see that we can confirm that that is the address of the target machine, and we can see that we're at the prompt here, The only difference here is that I'm not actually accessing the machine directly. So the machine is actually here. So if this was being watched by a user, they wouldn't actually see anything at all happening. And I've got access now to that particular machine. So I can press exit, and that will take me back out and into my own terminal. And again, if I want to access that account again, I just do exactly what I did before. SSH, the username that I'm going to use, at, and then the IP address. It'll ask me for the password again, so enter the super secret password, and there you go, I've now got access. And then from here, every command that I type is actually being run on that remote server. I can do ls, and I can make a directory, and you can see that directory there. And if I go over to the actual machine and put in the username and the password, and you can see that directory has been made on that remote machine. Equally, if I wanted to enter that directory, I just need to go cd, and that just means change directory, put in the directory name, and now you can see I'm actually inside that directory. There's nothing here, so I can echo a message, and all echo will do is, as it would say, it will actually echo whatever I have as a string, but I can also store this information or whatever I want into a file. So I'm just going to do test text, and you can see that I have a file here. And again, if I do one right facing chevron, it means it will actually create it. But say I want to append it, so I want to add this information to an existing file, then all I do is 2 chevrons, and that will basically append that particular file. So if I do that now, you can see there, let's just clear the screen, and if I want to check the contents of a file, I can do cat, then test txt, which is the file I want to open, and there you go, you can see my original message and also how I appended it. So using echo is very useful for very quick file creation. However, if I wanted to do something a little bit more, or have a little bit more control, I know on this server, or I have Nano, which is a very simple text editor, and I can put in the name of the file that I want to open, and then that will then open an editor, and I can add to the message, I can change things about the message, and then as you can see at the bottom, if I want to use any of the functions, the power sign is the control, and then obviously corresponding with the letter. So I want to exit, so I press Control and then X. It will save the modified buffer, in other words, all this text that I've added, I can now save it. So I just press Y for yes, and then it will ask me, do you wish to save it over the existing file? Just press enter, and that's it. So you see the file is still there. I can now do cat and do that with the file, and you will now see the edited version that was done in test. If I wanted to see who owned that file, as you've seen, ls will give me a list of the directory. If I wanted to see who owned that file, I could do ls -all, and then by doing so I can not only see the name of the file, but I can also see the permissions that are there. R being read, W being write, X standing for execute, and then the letter D signifies that it is a directory. So if I was to go back, which I'm going to change directory, if I press the dot, it will just keep me in the same directory. And in fact, if I use the instruction pwd, should tell me my working directory. Okay, and then if I want to go back from this directory back to the test or the earlier directory, I just type cd 2 dots, and then when I press enter, if I was to do pwd now, it will now show you that I'm now in test. And again, if I do that again, you can see that I'm in home. cd change puts me back into test. dir puts me back in the directory. Okay, so from here, this brings us nicely onto switch over to here, looking at the file structure. So if I was to go to cd, typically Linux file structures are fairly similar and very representative of what Unix file systems used to be. I won't go through all of these are things you can look at, but as you can see, there's a number of directories. I'm at the actual root or the main entry point here. I'm marked as a test at this particular server, so if I try to access the root folder here, it's going to tell me very politely that I don't have permission to access that particular folder. Whilst if I go to etc, I can go into that folder, and if I do an ls, I can see a list of files there. Okay, so you can see loads of files there. If I go back from here, brings me back to where I started. I could go into user, so cd user, and again I can list the load of files here, or directories that are here. And again, if I go back from here, I could go to var, so cd var, and again there are a lot of files here, okay, that I could use. If I wanted to, as you can see, these are some of the most common variables or names that you will see, and you can see that one is actually marked www, so I can just go into that folder, and you can see here that there's a HTML folder, and this is possibly where the website that I was looking at earlier would be housed. If I wanted to get straight back into my area or my home directory as we call it, we could do cd /home / and then the username, which is test, and that brings me right back to where I started from. Okay, if I wanted to delete a file, I can use the rm instruction. Now if I do a ls first, you can see that I'm actually outside of the directory, but I want to remove a file inside that directory. So what I can do rm / and then my dir and then / and then I believe the file is test.txt, and if I press enter now, there's not a file like that there, so let's go into the directory just to check the name that I used. Just trying to work out what I've done here. Try that again. So remove dir test.txt. No, it won't allow me to do it from here. Okay, I'll go into the directory and then I'll do it here. So test.x. There you go. That's deleted. And I can leave that file there. Should be able to remove this directory. There you go. So -d, and that will remove the directory itself. Yep, directory is now gone. Okay, so we've looked at basic navigation. We've also looked very briefly at some of these common commands. Let's talk a little bit about sudo. At the moment I'm at a user level, so if I was to type here who am I, it will tell me that I'm the user test and I'm actually in a group called test. But if I was to try and do something as the root user, say for instance I wanted to create something or delete something, or if I go back, let's go back to the root folder, you can see that I actually haven't got permission for this, so I can't access the root folder because I'm not actually root. So if I wanted to, I could temporarily elevate myself using a sudo command. For instance, I could do, well, if I do the switch user first, if I go back to home and into my test, and if I wanted to, I can switch the user to the root, and enter the root user's password. So now you can see I've now changed to become the root user, and I could create a file here. And then if I was to swap back to test, you can see that I've still got that file here, but if I do ls all, you can see that now this particular test file here is now being logged to the root. All of the users can actually read it, and everyone in the same group as root can also read it. but only the root can read and write to that particular file. So what this should mean is if I try to now open Nano, which is our text editor, against this particular file, it will allow me to edit it, but as you can see here that it is unwritable and only the root user can actually write to this. So if I do anything here, press X and then press Y, it's going to tell me that I can't do that. So if I press that and no for the moment, now I want to edit that file, but I don't want to permanently switch to becoming the root. So I can actually do, in some accounts, a sudo command where I can open up Nano as a sudo, in other words as a super user, but only temporarily for this particular instruction. Again, it will ask me for my password, but this account is not part of the sudoers. So in other words, I am not in an account that is considered a root user or root group account. But if I had an account which was root, then effectively from here I could just use the sudo command, put my instruction in, or whatever app I wanted to open as the root user, and then continue as I would before.